So this is for either one of you. What do you think has been the most important, dramatic, or largest change in the Cortland area in the last 60 years?
I would say the loss of large industry. We have a large employer, SUNY Cortland, but most of the other major industries that employed hundreds, if not thousands of individuals are no longer in this area.
Some of those industries being Wickwire Brothers on South Main Street, where my grandfather was employed as a teenager. Another one would be Brockway Motors that went off to Pennsylvania before it disbanded, and of course the museum is still here for us to reminisce about it. Many women who came over from Italy and the European countries were employed at the Crescent on South Main Street, which now hopefully will become a multi-useful building for both offices and living quarters. So we will be able to keep a historical building. The Crescent Corset building, or the Cortland Corset building on East Court Street, is now being used by local entrepreneurs who are vending their personal items either on a basis of many people in one shop or individuals. So we're hoping that that will take hold and that people will use those as local industries. Mm-hmm. Other places in Cortland, of course, which are still employing many people, are the Normal School, which is a mid 1850 complex for us that's now located on Court Street Hill. Probably is the largest employer in the city of Cortland proper, followed closely by the Regional Medical Center, which is hoping to expand and employ more people. My recollections of Cortland from the late 1940s to 1950, I think my generation refers back to, gee, remember when every store on Main Street had a business in it? And all the stores that had a business were run by local people. We could shop for stationery in a stationery store. We had beauty parlors that were run by local families, Gene Pauldine and his family. The stationery stores was Payne's Stationery and Mullins. Mr. Mullen is probably the senior man on Main Street in his early 90s, and he still goes to work in his store every day. We had newspaper stands. We had 3, 5, and 10-cent stores. The local home dairy where the seniors would go and buy lunch and gather for social reasons. The McNeil brothers, Danny and John, had a music store. The high school students, when I was still in high school, we couldn't wait to hop down Main Street after school to go to the varsity. The varsity at that time furnished us with Coca-Cola, a piece of chocolate cake, lunch, and socializing from the St. Mary's Parochial School to our neighbors at the Cortland High School, so that we mixed and became one group of people. Further on down Main Street, there was, of course, Montgomery Ward's, J.C. Penney's, Sears and Roebuck. The YWCA was our goal. That's where I learned to swim when I was a child. Belonged to a water ballet club that afforded me social connections. And then I would skip off to my home at 6 p.m. on the spot for dinner. So Kate can probably tell you what...
Well, and we wouldn't want to forget the large industry of Smith Corona.
Right.
Which employed, when I was in high school, thousands of people. Mm-hmm. They bussed them in from Syracuse, and they worked 3 shifts a day. And half the kids I went to school with worked at Smith Corona. Their parents worked at Smith Corona, and the other half was at Brockway's. Those were the 2 large.
Yeah. Did Smith Corona hire summer kids in high school to work in the summers?
That I don't know.
Okay. You grew up here in the 60s? Is that your
I moved to town when I was 5 years old in about 1970.
Okay, so you grew up here in the 70s?
Yes.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about that? About how
I actually grew up in the
Parkinson's-
village of Homer.
Yeah.
So it was a little more insulated, but we were able to play on the village green. That was actually my front yard because I grew up right downtown. And my best friend lived across the village green, so it was running across the park to each other's house. You had the basic stores on Main Street, the candy store, the meat market. I remember with the butcher with the sawdust still on the floor in his shop. We had Rexall's, Clark Brothers, that sold anything and everything. If you asked Mr. Clark for something, he would disappear into the catacombs of his store and he would come back with it, sure enough, in his hand within 10 minutes. And the hardware store still had the old wooden cabinets, counters, and everything, and you felt like you were going back into the turn of the century. Dashers was there, and you'd see people going in after work, and you would wave to parents of people you knew. You could eat at the David Harum restaurant. We were able to, ice skating on the village green. We changed a lot in different places of putting skates on. One year we used the wooden shack that they put next to the rink. One year we would cross the street and they allowed us, there was a gas station that sat about where the Homer Village Town Hall is now. There was a diner there was a bowling alley there, and there was an old gas station. And they opened up the building for us to change skates there. A bunch of us would pool money and actually eat at the diner. He had one booth. We were not allowed to go in before 1 in the afternoon. And we would pool our money and we would buy like three Pepsis or Cokes. I don't remember which product he sold. And we would order 2 things of French fries. And we would all sit at the booth pooling our money and sharing this afternoon time. But it had to be after his lunch crowd was done. For the time of first grade, you were able to ride your bike down all the way down North Main to Durkee Park and go swimming.
Yeah.
There was no fear of anybody being on your bikes any place in the village. And you just took off and hung out. In the summers, they had a travel craft van in Homer, and it would hit Newton Waterworks, Hooker Lane, the elementary school. It had like 4 stops, and you knew which days they were where, and you could go and participate in whatever activities was happening out of the back of the craft van.
Okay, let's go to the next one. What do you appreciate or enjoy the most about Cortland or the Cortland area?
I was gone for 12 years, right after college, and my husband and I had 2 children, and we came home for family. This is home. This is 6 generations of my family have been here. So it's a safe place to be. We wanted to raise our children here and for them to experience being around family that we had done growing up as well. And it's a comfortable place. There's highs and lows to the city of Cortland, as every small town is struggling with these days. I think there's a lot of people in the area that are working hard to make the positives out of things. Yes, we have empty stores on Main Street, but we also have a lot of restaurants and music in the evenings. In the summer, you can go, there's 3 nights a week, you can go downtown and either in a coffee shop, out in the parking lot, or in a local pub and enjoy all sorts of mixes of music between rock and jazz and everything else.
Great. How about you, Ann? Do you have anything you'd like to contribute?
Something that I really enjoy about the city of Cortland itself is the fact that just previous to my retiring from my nursing career, I was able to invest in a small piece of property. I raised my daughter living apartment style for many, many years, and then on my retirement I felt like I want a place of my own where I can do my own thing and have some kind of an investment in life. And I bought a small house on a, for lack of other words, a dead-end street, and it turned out to be the best kept secret in Cortland. It's a dead-end street. There's not a lot of heavy traffic. There are some young families with young children, but there's a lot of people that are my own age. And I find that we're good neighbors to each other, that we look out after each other, but we don't mind in other people's affairs. And I have a very large yard, which afforded me to, first summer, create a small patch to have 2 tomato plants. Well, those 2 patches have grown into 2 garage-sized areas where I can't wait for spring and summer to happen because it's part of the nature of the beast. I love to see things grow. So my house is important to me. My neighbors are important to me, and to be able to be outdoors in my yard is a wonderful, wonderful thing for me in my retirement years. And when I'm tired from being in the garden, I have an escape plan. The family has a piece of property on the side of a mountain, as we call it, Mount Toppin in Little York, New York. We have a small piece of property that my father and his friends purchased when they were in college. It was built in the late 1800s. It's a small cabin on the side of the hill. It's not furnished with a TV. There's no TV. There's no telephone ringing. It's pretty much a life of solitude, a screened-in front porch. It's 110 in the city, and it's only 88 or 90 on the front porch at camp. It's quiet, it's peaceful.
The breeze off the hill.
A short trot out the back door of the building takes me into a wood lot where I can check out the flora and fauna and a stream of water that comes off the hill. Anybody's invited to come and visit. It's sort of an open area for anybody who wants to escape the city at any given time. So I have the best of 2 worlds. I have my little private property in town, and I have my little private property on the side of the hill.
Well, actually, and because of this building and thanks to the Historical Society, we actually have photos of that property at the turn of the century by the Place family that lived there and owned it, Colonel Frank Place and his son Frank. His son Frank took lots and lots of pictures, so we have the inside of the building. Those pictures are here in the museum, in their storage vault, which is kind of exciting to have. That.
Yeah.
Maybe before we move on, Ann, you could tell us what you said before the camera was turned on about what a lady told you was her favorite place in Cortland, the Social Security.
Well, having breakfast with 5 of my friends early this morning, I presented them with some of the questions that probably could be answered appropriately by people who have now retired and thought about what they did in their younger years or where they enjoy spending their time now. One of the women is the wife of a photographer who has since passed. His business now belongs to her son-in-law and is still in business, and she likes to keep track of that. Another one of the ladies suggested that probably her favorite place, especially when the weather is nice, she again is enjoying flowers and foliage in the summertime in Cortland. She spends a considerable amount of time at Yeaman Park. In the back of the park, there's a gazebo. We picnic there, several of us together. She might sit at a picnic table to read a magazine or work on her crafts, where in the corner of her eye she can see progress taking place. That Interstate 81 that came through our community travels right past where this park is. She enjoys the sandy beach and looking at the children in the skateboard park, and is quite happy to see all those things. I also have a personal friend that I went to grammar school and high school with that lives in the adjacent Hickory Park area where the people there use this park. It's busy most days, all day long.
Thank you. Great, yes, thank you. All right. Do you have a memorable moment or a favorite memory that you'd like to share?
As starting out in the 1950s, I think some of my favorite moments that I could share with people who might relate to this. I lost my dad in the early 1950s. My recollection, of course, somebody you lose is very vivid in your imagination, or in the reality of life. As a young child, his fun with family was sledding on Pendleton Street Hill, which now is occupied by a housing unit. When I was young, it was a farmer's field, and they grazed cows in the summertime, and in the winter, Dad would take 4 of us, my elder sister and my 2 younger brothers, to Pendleton Street Hill, where he would build the jump, and he would ride the back end of the toboggan. And we would come down that hill, and as only he could, laugh and have a great time, looking like a snowman when he got off. So that was one of my fun memories of him. And in the summertime, on the same hill, we would go south. We would go from Pendleton Street Hill to an area that was always referred to as Hobo Valley, that had a stream of water in it. And my mom in the summer would pack us a sandwich and a bag lunch and say, okay, everybody out, I'll see you at supper time, have fun today. And we were allowed to go there and have a great time in the summer. That area, in research, one could find the family who made the local fireworks that were exhibited in the summertime at St. Anthony's Day. The Bettino family had a fireworks building where they made fireworks, and Dad knew them personally, so of course we always had to stop by and see what was happening. We could continue south, and finally we could exit the hill and come out on the Kellogg Road, over the OU Kellogg farm on the Kellogg Road, which I'm not sure, the barn I think has just recently failed to stand up as majestically as it did when I remember it as a child. When we exited the Kellogg Road on the corner, it was my great-grandmother's house, where Bill Brothers Dairy stands now. And my dad's Uncle Bill raised his Irish setter dogs in that pen. My sister and I would stay with Uncle Bill, and he would let us feed the chickens, feed the cow that was in the pasture, spend time in his house, and reminisce about early family times. And I think those are great memories. Across the street there was a little tiny building which still stands that was a grocery store. And in the dead of winter, Dad would take us from Cedar Street, which is on the west side of the tracks, 2 blocks, all the way down Port Watson to his grandmother's area, 217 Port Watson, where he would buy a pint of hand-packed ice cream. And then we would go back up to Cedar Street, and when Mom had dinner ready, dessert was always a pint of hand-packed ice cream that was sliced into 6 pieces. So, of course, those are great memories.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And then I remember the traditions of the community. I mean, my whole life it's been the Maple Fest and the fireworks in Little York. Little York has dwarfed into big events and then smaller events, but the fireworks have always stayed. And the dairy parade. So there are things that you do and you take your kids to and your grandkids to or whatever, and there are things that you look forward to. The Maple Festival, I remember going as early as I was 6 or 7.
On the train.
And then, well, that's what I was going to say. I took my children. How do you do a train ride? We would get on the train in Cortland and ride it to the Maple Festival. Sometimes the weather was so bad we wouldn't even get off the train. We would just ride down so that they would learn what it was like to ride on a passenger train, looking out the windows and seeing the scenery as we went down the rail line out of Cortland to Marathon.
That's cool. Really cool. Okay, and so what is your favorite place in Cortland or the Cortland area?
I think I'd have to say that my favorite place in Cortland County is Mount Toppin in the summer. And spring is probably my favorite time of the year. And my calendar for spring is when the ground gets soft enough that I can find the activity. Excuse me, but it's the worms that make the holes in the ground to help aerate for what's coming up for summer. And of course the fall foliage is absolutely beautiful in Cortland County. The new dam that they've put in at Little York Lake poses a wonderful, wonderful place for any local photographer to film the change in the foliage, the end of the dam, the end of the lake, Mount Toppin in the background. And the fact that the blue herons have taken roost up there is also an enjoyable thing to see in the summertime. I am very impressed with our having the courthouse park that we have. There's a large monument to the Civil War soldier that's been facing up Port Street Hill from the time I was a very small child. And the pool of water, the fountain that was created that's in front of the Civil War soldier, is there because of some early residents of Cortland, the Jones family from B.T. Jones and Mousy. They're financially backed that, as well as my stepfather, Mr. Danny Houlihan, that was superintendent of the local water board. He helped to finance the building of that fountain that's in the courthouse park. So I look at it as being, my family has left some tangible items that are great memories for me, that make me feel like I'm a real townie.
I would say I don't think I have a specific place within the community. I think it's the community itself, the diversity that we have, and that's part of the reason why we did come home. Is it's the whole area. We get the wonderful change of seasons, and we have activities that do all 4 seasons here. I think there's 3 ski centers within the county boundaries and 1 just outside. And as growing up, I participated in ski clubs with the schools and actually skied at all of them over time. And I think it's the community itself and the area and the people that bring people to here and why they stay and enjoy it.
That's wonderful. Well, we're out of questions, but we're not out of questions in general. What sort of things have come to your mind during this, or anything else that you want to share with us?
Oh, I've spent a considerable amount of my time as a retired individual taking in the 1890 house. My best friend and I spent every Thursday for 3 years helping to be housekeepers and to set up exhibits that they might have at different times during the years. So the 1890 house is a special place. Of course, there's many other things happening that I've taken part in. Cortland Repertory Theater, having been at the Little York Pavilion at the end of the lake for many, many years, and now operates in downtown Cortland, sending people to the local eateries before they go into some kind of an event that happens at CRT. The Center for the Arts in Homer is turned into a really great godsend for the community. It has children's activities. They show early movies, black and white even, sound movies. It's free entrance for people during the week. I think it mostly in the winter time when there's a lull in other activities. That's been a great thing for us too. And like my daughter said, we have to be positive about the good things that we have and encourage the younger generation to get involved, to be involved, to not be on their, cell phone and conversationally on their cell phone. People talking to each other and gathering socially, I think, is the future of Cortland and life in itself, is people communicating with one another.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of my friends from high school, several of us have all gone away and returned, all to do the same thing of raising our children. And it's interesting to have 3 generations of family that are intertwined at some point that are not family. They're just generations of different families that have been around each other forever. And you're each other's pseudo aunts and uncles kind of things to kids, and it's a very nice community and a wonderful atmosphere.
It's kind of a throwback to different times, I think, where you do have the connections between neighbors and people. As you're speaking, that's what occurs to me. There aren't too many places because of the transient nature of most of the people going to different areas for jobs. But here, there's some stability in that, even if it is people coming back. Well, you mentioned, Ann, that you were a nurse.
I'm a retired nurse.
Where did you work?
I was employed in many different areas. I did my nursing school training in Ithaca, New York. From there I traveled to Washington, D.C. for a couple of years, and then I was in Norfolk, Virginia. I was married to a serviceman. And from Norfolk, Virginia, we went back into New York City. He had a job at Federal Office Building in New York. And from there we were stationed on an island in the Caribbean for a couple of years in the 60s when Kate was 3.5. Her birthday had just happened when we went there. And she had the fortune of being able to go to school in the West Indies, in Barbados. So she completed her pre-K and her kindergarten, taught by a nun from Jamaica, and came back to this country, and we found ourselves living in Rhode Island, where she wasn't allowed to go to school because she wasn't old enough yet. Even though she knew at that point that the alphabet ended in Z from her training in the islands. And I guess from there I came back into the Cortland area. I was employed at the Cortland Hospital on a couple of different occasions in between being moved from one area to another with the military. Then when she was growing up in Homer, I worked in Cortland and then matriculated to the Upstate Medical Center. I think I would have to say that my most enjoyable employment was my tour of duty in the open heart surgery unit at Upstate Medical Center, post-op care of people, and there were several people from the Cortland area who passed through my unit. So I felt honored and proud to have been part of their care, as personally and as a nurse with my profession. And after that, after close to 15 years, I decided that the travel of back and forth to Syracuse had gotten the best of me, and I came back into Cortland and I worked in one of the local nursing homes until my retirement, until I turned 65 in a few months. And then after my retirement, people ask me all the time, just exactly what do you do with your retirement? It's making me nervous. I'm afraid to retire. I won't know what to do. Well, my pat answer is always, what do I do? Not much, but I enjoy every bit of it.
And it makes for a full day.
It makes me full. It lets me get up when I want and go to bed when I want and do what I want in between. If the weather's nice, I'm out. If the weather is poor, I'm at the Cortland County Historical Society or the Cortland Library, or in my living room in the peace and quiet reading a book.
Nice. Really nice.
Yeah.
How about you, Kate? What do you do for work?
My primary work is a mother. My secondary, I took a job 10 to 2 at the Homer School cafeteria. So I get to intermix with a lot of the teenage children. I'm at the high school, and so I intermix with a lot of them. And by doing I did that part-time before I went in full-time. But I was able to participate a lot in the elementary schools as my children grew up, and it became interesting. I was with the PTO, and I had more kids thinking that I worked in the building because I was at Parker as much as I was. They would ask me, can they go to? And I said, I can't answer that. You need to talk to a teacher.
You have that voice of authority. How many children do you have?
I have a son, Nicholas, and I had a daughter, Cassidy.
You had mentioned to me also that you had a frame shop at one time.
For about 2 years in Homer when the kids were really little. I had worked at Meldrum's in college and knew, and they had a frame shop upstairs, so I was familiar with the business. And then somebody had a shop in Homer that was going to sell out, and I had the opportunity to purchase it, and I did that for 2 years, and it was wonderful and exciting. And it just got to be a lot with the children, and as they got into school and they got busier, it was just a lot to do. at the same time. So
And the name of the shop was?
you've been framed.
Oh, perfect.
That's a great name. You're both so knowledgeable about history, Cortland County history.
I get mine probably from my mother. Ann is my mother, and she has a sister Mary, and growing up with the two of them, and having a mother that was a nurse, she worked every other weekend. So I spent my off weekends with Aunt Mary as a caretaker, and I went every place with the two of them, and they both were always involved in history and interested. And so I've actually been in and out of this building since I was 10, working on things and participating in things, and moving the library from upstairs into the addition when it was built, and moving the wagons to Little York Park for the 4th of July. We took, I think, 3 sleighs, a surrey, a wagon. There were 3 vehicles, and we towed them behind vehicles. And I don't know why nobody took a picture of this fiasco going down 281 and Route 11, but it was quite a scene.
When was that?
I think the bicentennial. And we hitched them up through, each of us held a wagon and tied it to the back seat of another car, and we went 10 miles an hour down the road with the surrey with the fringe, and yes, it was quite a parade.
And how about you, Ann? Why are you so interested in history?
I think it's been instilled in me since my youth, but like Kate said, she spent time with me, and she spent time with her Aunt Mary, who was a couple of years older than myself. Mary, from the bicentennial years, was terribly interested in searching the areas that were covered by Frank Place, Senior and Junior, the gentleman who built our cabin. He had gone in and out of all the burial grounds in Cortland County in the 1930s, and Mary thought in the 1970s, I wonder how many of those places I could find. I think it was just a challenge to her. And while she was doing that project, she came upon what she felt were very early gravestones, and thought, why are those very early ones that are written on like they are? Why are they in Cortland County? And she spent the better part of the next 30, 40, almost 50 years now doing research on that project. And I think I just hung on her shoestrings, helping her do that sort of thing. She had moved to North Carolina, but needed answers to some questions she had in New York State, Vermont, and Pennsylvania. So she would write to me and say, oh, on Saturday, if you're not working, how about if you travel off to Whitney Point and Coventryville and Lyle and Texas Valley, and see if you can fill in some spaces on the paperwork that I'm doing. And it was itinerant folk art, which fascinated me. So I think I just latched on to her strings, and I'm very interested in, personally, we had a family reunion in the 1976, like many other families had, where Mary had helped us all to understand we are Dexters, but where did the Dexters come from and how many of them are there? Which took us to Cape Cod in the Boston area, and then we were off into New England. And doing family research at that point was something that you had to do in a vehicle. You had to travel. You had to travel there, and you had to find it yourself. It wasn't as easy as pushing a button on Ancestry.com that would tell you who you are and where you came from. So they turned into really great vacation days or single days, one by one, and brought me back to the Historical Society in Cortland to say, who was this Mr. Dexter that owned a hotel on Main Street? It took us a while to find that out. Where did great-grandfather go when he was 22, when he went to Michigan? Why did he go there? Who did he go to see? Oh, he went in the Civil War. What happened to him? He was injured. Oh, then he came back. Married a local woman, had 2 children. That's why our family house is on Elm Street. Oh, that solved a question in our mind's eye. All my history involvement, I think, had to do with family. I had an avid postcard collection at one time, turned it over to my daughter, and she enjoyed my postcards, and then it was a place for us to go and search out something that added to something else. Probably helped her through her frame shop, pictures. She enjoyed enlarging those pictures, and if local people were interested in, gee, you don't happen to have a picture of my house, or you don't happen to know who my grandfather was. So then by helping other people out, it adds to our interest.
You're both so knowledgeable that I see Kate on Facebook correcting or adding information about things that people post. It's interesting. You're kind of
Well,
kind of an expert on.
As the more you do and the more you study, I was asked to look up some pictures for Main Street for the Historical Society website. And as I was pulling images and looking at things and finding information, by the time I got done, I was asked to present a lunch and learn item for their series on the business district of Main Street. So things morph into other things. And as of right now, I am working on a project on the wagon works that were here about 1894. I'm using one of our maps, and there are 7 or 8 wagon companies in town. That's one of the industries that made Cortland. That was all before our time. But we had Hitchcock and Cortland Wagon Works that was owned by Mr. Fitzgerald. They were world renowned, and the quantities of wagons that came out of here, part thanks to the railroad coming through town, promoted us all over the world. So that'll be my next series. But as you look up different things, and there's so much information here, different things intertwine and connect. And she says, we're from different generations. One of the things I found, or she actually found for me, was a 1971 tourism guide for Cortland. And that seems to be the hit right now on the internet because everybody's enjoying these pictures from the early 70s.
I wondered
and
where those pictures came from. I saw
Exactly.
the Holiday Inn yesterday.
That's exactly what they are.
Yeah.
Mom takes them for granted because I lived that time.
Yeah.
It's not something special because I was there. I sometimes forget that she wasn't there, and that's news to her. So,
Things that I barely remember, but the interesting things. The biggest hit was the inside of the mall. Cortland had a mall, and everybody forgets that mall was here for about 30 years.
Wow. Although some of what people said about it was wrong.
Right,
What
but
stores were there?
right.
They could
but
correct
that's
it.
the interesting
Yeah,
thing that people were. We had a mall, and where was the mall, and where did it go to, and what was it?
yeah.
So and it was built by the man that built all the malls in the area. So that was the Pyramid Company. It was a brief stint of the Pyramid. They also built the Ithaca Mall. But we had our inside shopping, and it's part of, yes, it changed the look of Main Street because Burgess left Main Street and some other businesses left Main Street to go to this mall. So there's Yays and Booze, but now it's back to a strip mall again.
Like so many.
So the inside mall was gone from Cortland, but this is one item that people are, it's exciting to see. And we're always hoping people share. Another thing that we're missing is pictures of Little York Park, the carousel, the rides. We have no pictures here of the rides at Little York Park. So we're looking for people to share, and people that take it for granted that, it's a picture of you riding on the roller coaster. Well, please share it. We would love to have images of the rides, the roller coaster, the train, the swing that went around. There were 4 or 5 motorized rides out there.
I wanted my daughter on one.
Right. The older of my 2 brothers, Jer Ira Dexter, that was the sports editor of the Cortland Standard for so many years. That was his full-time employment when he was in high school. He was the engineer of the train at Little York Park. Don McCrae and his business partner were involved with the building at Little York Park, where they had an eatery inside, and they were the people who had, I think, purchased the carousel, the train. There was another
Roller coaster.
and the roller coaster
And a swing.
and a swing. And
That puts you
if-
way out in the air.
certainly, if anybody has any recollection of the people who were running the park at that time, it would be very important for them to come forth and be able to document, either verbally or in photographs, some of the happenings at the park during the Jer graduated in 1965, 63 from St. Mary's, so it would have been between 1959 and 1965 or 7 that this took place at the park.
There were also, I remember that was, I don't think I was living in the area when the carousel was auctioned. And it's just that feeling of, there goes your childhood with,
Right, yeah.
you know, with the sale of something like that, that's a prominent item. Ithaca was able to save theirs. They take it down every winter and they bring it out every spring, and I've taken my children over to Ithaca to ride the Ithaca carousel. But Cortland County's is missing. It's gone.
It's a shame.
But
Yeah.
Was there anything that you're burning to add to what you've already said, or Robin, do you have anything
No,
that occurs to you to add?
No.
Nothing you're dying to say.
No, I think we would be remiss in saying that if the normal school, as it was known at the Courthouse Park in the mid to late 1800s, my father's oldest sister attended the Cortland Normal School and graduated in 2 years and became a teacher.
briefly.
Who briefly was a teacher who traveled by getting a buckboard and a horse from Tickner's store on Court Street, and she would travel from Tickner's. Now, mind you, she was born in 1897, so this is 20 years later. She's boarding a buckboard and going up Main Street to Groton Ave, to Homer Ave, which could well have been Adams Street still at that time, through the village of Homer, up Route 11 to Sessions Hill Road to a one-room schoolhouse, down to East Homer to teach school, probably an overnight, headed for Truxton area, headed for Baltimore, and back home on Route 11. Well, she got on her buckboard one morning. I'm not sure what time. I'm not sure what time of the year it was, but she got as far as the overpass in Homer, right about where A.B. Brown's of the Rockaways Museum is located, and the train was passing through, probably underneath the overpass, and blew the whistle. And boy, I'll tell you what, that horse, he put her in the back of the buckboard. He turned around, and the next thing she knew, she was back at Tickner's. And she got off that buckboard and went down and asked the brewers in the office if they were looking for any help.
And she was a secretary for 40 plus years. So Brewer Titch.
That was the end of her
Years
teaching.
are made.
That was the end of her teaching career and the beginning of being a secretary in Cortland. Yeah. She was quite a lady. Yeah. The Cortland Business Institute that was located on what we know today as Central Ave. There was a massive fire. I'm going to guess when.
That was over the Democrat building.
Yep. When?
Still there.
When did
Turn
it?
of the century.
Okay. The Cortland Democrat was located on Central Avenue, and the Cortland Business Institute was over the Cortland Democrat. Now there's a big vacant parking lot to the east of that, which is public parking. It held the Cortland Elks Club at one time, and there was a big fire that was devastating. But the building that the Cortland Business Institute on the second floor still remains on Central Ave. And as I said, my dad's two sisters, Catherine and Eleanor, were both students there. in the early 1900s.
Why, Ann?
This is a picture that's entitled The Old Home in Dear Old Cortland Town. Its words and music were written by William A. Dillon, or Bill Dillon, of the Dillon Brothers of Cortland, New York. Their home was on Pendleton Street, and Dad ran a grocery store on Pendleton Street where the Cortland Ice Company was once located. The Dillon Brothers, I'd be guessing to say, I think there were 8 in total. Most were boys. There might have been a couple of girls. To state that their probably most famous piece of music was I Want a Girl Just Like the Girl That Married Dear Old Dad. So that gave Cortland a little bit of fame in the early days.